Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from Daniel's 8th chapter. We made it all the way up until the 14th verse, which describes the prophecy from verses 15 through 27. The verses we're going to be covering today gives an explanation to the prophecy. So we just want to briefly review what transpired. This vision occurred. Now, the book of Daniel can be divided into the first 6 chapters describe events in his life. 7 through 12 describe personal visions. So this particular vision occurred in the 3rd year of the reign of Belteshazzar, the final Babylonian king. This places us in the year 551 BM before Messiah. So it is chronologically antecedent to the event described in the 6th chapter, as is the one in the 7th chapter. That vision occurs in the 1st year of his reign. And the location of the vision is Susa, which is some 200 miles southeast of Babylon. And it was in the province of Elam. It would have belonged to Iran. Babylon was still the reigning geopolitical entity. They were going to be displaced eventually by the Medo-Persians who hailed from Iran, and it was by the river Ulai. And now much of what we read pertain to the Medo-Persian empires and the Greeks specifically. So there are 4 progressions of geopolitically dominant entities which are described in the 2nd and 7th chapter. In the 2nd chapter, we read that, the tail end of the 1st, we read that Daniel was skilled in interpreting the dreams of others, and he interprets the dream of Nebuchadnezzar of a statue with respective elements and body parts, each representing the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, the Greek, and the Romans. Then in the 7th chapter, he has a personal vision of his own where Babylon is represented by a lion, the Medo-Persians are represented by a bear, the Greeks are represented by a leopard, and the Rome and also the post-Romes are represented by a wild, uncontrollable beast. And here the metaphor is reduced. It only pertains to 2 of these entities, Persia and Greece, and Persia is represented by a ram, Greece by a goat, and we read of the ram in the 3rd verse. Then in the 5th, we read of the goat, which is Greece. And after Alexander the Great conquered almost instantly, he stretched beyond what the Persians had labored for at least a century to build. He conquered it in a 10-year march, but after his death, he died naming no successor, so his kingdom was split into 4 kingdoms, each led by a respective general. And then in the 9th verse we read, and one of them is a little horn which became exceedingly great towards the south and towards the east and towards the splendid land. This is in reference to Antiochus IV, who is not as historically significant in the wider lens of history as he is in the Jewish history. He was a prelude to the anti-Messiah. He did unspeakable things, and we receive the most extensive treatment of him in Daniel's 11th chapter, verses 21 through 45. We can also read of him in the Maccabee books. But he exalted the 11th verse. It even exalted itself as high as the prince of the host, and it took that which is continual away from him and threw down the foundation of the temple. So he had a God complex, which he didn't have a special vendetta against the Jewish religion. He had a thing against all religion because he demanded and tolerated no rival for worship. He thought he was God, and so he trampled with which was continual sacrifices were offered in continual perpetuity in the temple, and he really threw down the foundation of that by eliminating it altogether. And then in the 14th and closing verse of the range we've already covered, read that for 2,300 mornings, so that is a reference. Now, there were 2 sacrifices a day, so that places it at 1,150 days. This is the range between when Antiochus discontinued, or he actually slaughtered pigs on the sacrificial altar to Zeus. Then the rebellion against the Maccabees ended that in 165 BM. And now the 15th verse, we read, "And it came to pass, when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, that I sought understanding, and see before me stood one having the appearance of a mighty man." So Daniel struggled to digest it all. It was a lot to digest. It was a lot to observe. There's a lot of mysteries in the prophecies. For instance, we don't know the names of any of these people, the exact date. So there is a lot to take at face value. Much of prophecy is necessarily layered in mystery. It's not meant to be explicit. It's enough to give us with enough, not so much it gives us the correct balance of hope and faith, but luckily there was one there to give him the external aid in the interpretation that he himself had provided Nebuchadnezzar, the king who was visited by the troubling dream in the 2nd chapter. This is not the last time that Daniel would rely on an external source for the interpretation of the vision, which is also given to him from someone else. "And I heard a man's voice between Uli, who called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision." Uli is the river we read of in the 2nd verse. It's in the territory of Susa in the province of Elam. And Gabriel is one of the 2 only angels mentioned by name. The other is Michael the archangel. Gabriel intervened. He's written of in the book of Daniel and also referenced in the virgin birth, at least in Luke's account. And the other person is summoning him to elucidate and illuminate the understanding, the meaning of the vision to him. "He then came near where I stood, and when he came I feared, and I fell on my face, but he said to me, Understand, son of man, for the vision is for the time of the end." So this was an exhausting ordeal. He fainted from and collapsed from the sheer weight of the magnitude of the prophecy which had awaited him, and he was unable to physically stand where he stood, because he says, "Where I stood," and then he suddenly feared, and fell on his face, but he offers him the comfort of the understanding that he seeks and struggles to attain outside of external aid. And the vision is for the time of the end, so even though a lot of the prophecy has already been fulfilled, prophecy echoes throughout the generations. So Antiochus is a prelude and a portend to the anti-Messiah and all that stuff. "And as he was speaking with me, I fell, stunned upon my face to the ground, but he touched me and stood me up straight." So his gentle healing touch was sufficient to edify him to stand once more, because he was so defeated, so depleted, so exhausted, at his physical strength's wit's end that he could not stand, but the angel touched him, and he stood up, and he was straight, and said, "Look, I am making known to you what shall take place in the latter time of the wrath, for at the appointed time shall be the end." So he's going to give him the understanding and the illumination and the truth of the vision which just transpired, which a lot of it doesn't make sense. There's a lot of mysteries and ambiguities and things and questions. It ultimately poses more questions than it answers. Thankfully, he is here, and as he says, it's going to be at an appointed time. So with certainty, we can claim that it will come to pass, and it already has come to pass. But with uncertainty, we can claim when it will come to pass again. Remember, there's a prophetic echo from the ancient world to the modern. "The ram which you saw, having 2 horns, are the kings of Medes and the Persians." So the ram is symbolically representative of the Medo-Persian Empire. They were once the dominant geopolitical entity in the ancient Near East. Cyrus the Great was the founder, the Achaemenian dynasty. They also had the Sassanids and the Parthians, and today they are a force to be reckoned with as the modern country of Iran. They certainly do have a role to play in the end times which await us. Greece, not so much, at least not not yet, but Iran is a force to be reckoned with. And the male goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between his eyes is the first king. So the male goat, once more, is Greece, and the horns, there are plenty of horns on these metaphorical animals, and the largest one is the first king. That would have been Alexander, although he did inherit the United Greek Confederation from his father Philip. And that it was broken and four stood up in its place are four rulerships arising out of that nation, but not in its power. So a divided kingdom is not going to have the same strength or be the same force it could have been reckoned with. There's a reason that the empire of Alexander did not flourish and prosper in as much as the Roman Empire did. That is because he did not name a successor, so he left the generals to squabble and fight amongst themselves. There were four major kingdoms, one of which was in Asia Minor, the other one was in Greece and Macedonia itself. The two dominant ones, the king of the south and the king of the north, referenced in Daniel 11, are respectively Egypt of the Ptolemies and the Seleucid dynasty. And in the year 197, now the Promised Land had historically been under the control of the Egyptians until the switcheroo in 197. So they fought amongst territories between themselves. Even though they were united by ethnicity, they represented different kingdoms, and they fought amongst themselves. They who had assisted Alexander in conquering the world would turn against themselves, and their descendants would too. And in the latter time of their rule, when the transgressions has filled up their measure, a king fierce of faith and skilled in intrigue shall stand up. So at the day of iniquity, when sin it reaches its climax and crescendo and apex, that's when this man, who we know with the gift of hindsight is Antiochus IV, surnamed Epiphanes, and he was not he had no legitimate claim to the throne. What he did was he usurped power because the legitimate claimant to the throne was a minor and not of the age at which he could be trusted to exercise rulership. So he posed as his guardian and supplanted him and usurped him. And so he was skilled at intrigue, and he was fierce in face. He was manipulative, Machiavellian, and he will stand up and rise and rule, and he will create all sorts of trouble, especially for the Jewish people. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, for he shall destroy incredibly, and shall prosper and thrive, and destroy mighty men, and the sacred people. So he's going to be mighty in strength and strong in power, but his power does not derive from itself. It comes from Satan. He's a satanically endowed man, as will be the anti-Messiah, the end-time dictator. And he's going to destroy everything in its past, and he himself shall prosper and thrive and destroy the sacred people. Those are the saints. Those are the Jews of the Old Covenant. They are also the Christians of the New Covenant. So the anti-Messiah is going to behead anyone who doesn't carry the mark of the beast in the book of Revelation, of which we're warned. And through his skill he shall make deceit prosper in his hand, and hold himself to be great in his heart, and destroy many who are at ease, and even stand against the prince of princes. Yet without hand he shall be broken. So he does possess a certain amount of skill. He is skilled in the art of statecraft and subterfuge and deceit and subversion, and he uses deceit to prosper and advance himself and empower himself, and to secure and solidify his hold on power. And he's going to destroy any and all who stand in his way, and many who don't even pose the threat he thinks he is. He's going to be destroying them out of some sadistic impulse, because he is a destructive man by nature. So those who are in comfort, minding their own business, are going to be suddenly destroyed, but he's going to meet the same end eventually, but he's going to stand against the Prince of Princes. That is a reference to Yahshua Messiah, the King of Kings and the Master of Masters. So that's the anti-Messiah. He is his counterfeit and his antagonist. And as for Antiochus himself, in the year 164 BM, he died either by illness or accident in Tebea, which is located in Persia. So death was inescapable. He thought he was God. He thought he was immortal. But like all men, he came to pass and met his end and died ignominiously. And what was said in the vision of the evenings and mornings is truth. And hide the vision, for it is many days. So this is Gabriel instructing Daniel to trust the veracity of the vision and its interpretation, but he's telling him to conceal it, to not make it known. And this is the opposite of what we read of in Revelation. But it will reveal and manifest and come to pass and be proclaimed after many days. The time is not yet right, but it has been since made right. So we do have the gift of the foresight of this prophetic illusion to prepare for the end days, the end times, and the tribulation. And I, Daniel, was stricken and became sick for days. Then I rose and went about the king's work, for I was amazed at the vision, but there was no understanding. So the contents and the overwhelming nature of this vision and its context depleted him even after first beholding it, he couldn't stand, and he found himself in a similar state of weakness, having been told the meaning and the interpretation of it. He finds himself sick for a period of days, but he is the king's employee, so he was he went about the king's work. That was his daily business, and he was amazed and perplexed by the vision, but he still lacked the understanding. So there are a lot of puzzle pieces, a lot of missing puzzle pieces, which are more readily available to us with the gift of hindsight than Daniel, who had the gift of foresight. But foresight combined with hindsight can elucidate and explain any prophecy. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.